Welcome back to Nature Documentary for Sleep. If you're listening along, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing for more sleepy geography. Tonight, you're sliding onto Lake Maracaibo at midnight, heading for the Catatumbo Delta with a small boat and a dry bag. The horizon won't stay dark because the clouds keep flashing from the inside again and again. You cut the engine to listen, and the air is warm, wet, and heavy enough to feel like weather you could drink. You tell yourself it's a passing storm, so you drift to save fuel and keep the instruments dry. But the flashes don't thin out. They stack into a steady pulse that turns distance into guesswork. Mangroves close in, channels split, and every burst of light resets your night vision a little worse. Out here, being low on the water feels safe, right up until you remember the motor and its wiring. So what actually keeps this lightning anchored over the same patch of lake? And what fails first when you push through it anyway? The first real escalation is not the lightning. It is the sound. A soft ticking starts in the canopy, like fingertips drumming on a table. Then the ticks become thuds, fat drops hitting the lake and bursting into little rings. Your cheap plastic poncho goes from useless to insulting in about 10 seconds. The rain is warm, but it steals your grip anyway, turning the tiller slick. You reach for the handheld weather radio in the dry bag, and your knuckles brush metal. That tiny contact makes you flinch because your body remembers what your brain is trying to downplay. A strobe flash opens the world, and you see the delta mouth closer than it should be. Not closer in distance, closer in feeling, like the lake is quietly sliding you forward. The current is breathing out of the river, pushing a darker band of water into the lake, and with it comes debris, reed mats, and a slow rotating log that could take the prop clean off. So you do the sensible thing, the thing that keeps you alive in most places. You start the engine again. The motor coughs, then catches, and the vibration through the floor feels like company. A new flash hits, brighter, and for the first time, you see the storm has structure. The clouds are not a smear. They are towers, stacked into an anvil ceiling with glowing ribs inside them. You think heat lightning is harmless, distant, polite? Wrong. This is lightning with a schedule, showing up to work every night like it has bills. You point the bow toward the widest channel because wide means options. Then the wind shifts, not hard, just enough to make the mangroves hiss. And the hiss is followed by a low, rolling sound you feel in your teeth. Thunder, not a single crack either. Layered thunder, like doors slamming down a hallway that never ends. The shoreline becomes a broken silhouette, mangrove roots like spider legs in the shallows. You angle away from them because getting snagged here is how you become a stationary object. Stationary objects on open water are basically suggestions to the sky. You check your headlamp, then decide not to use it. A white beam makes you visible, and visibility feels like volunteering. Instead, you steer by lightning, which is a terrible plan disguised as free lighting. Each flash gives you a snapshot, a frozen frame of water texture, and drifting weeds. Between flashes, the world deletes itself, leaving only the engine hum and rain. This is what the Delta does. It edits reality into fragments, and you have to stitch them together while moving. Another development arrives as a smell. Warm mud, yes, but also diesel, and something sour, rotting vegetation stirred up and smeared through brackish water, Lake Maracaibo is not a clean bowl. It is a shallow basin that collects rivers the way a sink collects dishwater. The Catatumbo and its neighbors pour in fresh water and silt all day. At night, the lake exhales heat, and the air over it rises like a tired ghost. Up above you, cooler air slides down from the Andes to the west. It is denser, it is impatient, and it undercuts the warm air like a wedge. That collision is your storm's first ingredient. Moisture plus lift plus a boundary where air masses argue. The lake supplies the moisture endlessly. The mountains supply the cooler air on time like clockwork, and the basin shape keeps the argument trapped here, repeating. You can feel it now because the wind comes in little pulses. Each pulse pushes the boat sideways, and you correct again. The radio crackles suddenly, startling you into nearly dropping it. A distant voice is listing warnings in Spanish, fast and tired. You catch the phrase, activated electrica intensa, and then the signal dissolves into static. The static is not comforting. It means the air is getting more charged, more noisy, more crowded with electricity. Another flash shows you a forked bolt, not hitting the lake, but crawling cloud to cloud. It looks like a vein lighting up under skin. Then the next bolt spears down, somewhere deeper in the delta, and the water jumps. You tell yourself it is far, but far is a lie when you are surrounded by flat water and reflections. Distance here is a feeling, not a fact. The channel splits ahead, and the right branch looks wider. Wider means fewer roots, fewer snags, fewer surprises. So, you choose the right branch. That is your first clear decision point, and you make it with the confidence of someone who has not yet paid for it. The right branch is wider for about 15 seconds. Then, floating plants begin to gather along its edges. Thick mats bumping the hull. They make a sound like wet carpet being dragged. Something taps the side, and you see a turtle shell, or a piece of plastic, or both. In this light, in this strobe world, everything is only partially itself. You try to keep the motor steady because revving sends spray onto the housing, but going slow means the current has opinions. A side current catches the bow and nudges you left toward the mangroves. You correct too late. The boat slides into a tighter corridor, and suddenly the mangroves arch overhead. The branches knit into a ceiling. It feels safer for half a breath because you are not the highest point anymore. Then you remember, trees are famous for being struck by lightning. Congratulations. You traded open exposure for being near tall, wet conductors. A flash detonates above, and for a second, the mangrove leaves glow like green glass. You see the channel ahead kink sharply, like a vein in a wrist. You steer into the kink because you do not have a better option. The rain thickens, and it hits your cheeks like tossed gravel. Your eyes sting, not from salt, from constant blinking and sudden light. Lightning keeps resetting your night vision, stealing the dark adaptation your brain is trying to build. Every time you begin to see, the sky punches you back into blindness. Another thunder roll arrives, closer, and the water surface trembles. Not waves yet, just a shiver, like the lake is flinching. Your headlamp strap is sticky with sweat, Your hands are pruning, and it has been less than an hour. You glance at your watch, then realize you cannot trust it emotionally. Time out here does not pass. It accumulates. The next development is visual, and it is worse than a bolt. In a flash, you see old wooden stakes in the water, a fence line, then a small platform, a palafito, a stilt hut, low and crooked, with a dim lantern glow inside. Someone is awake. Someone is always awake here, because the sky makes sleep a hobby. You have two options, and both are bad. You can keep moving and risk the channel tightening until you cannot turn around, or you can stop, tie up, and borrow someone else's risk for a moment. You choose the hut, you ease the panga alongside, and the smell changes immediately. Wood smoke, old fish, kerosene, damp fabric, human smells, small and familiar, which makes the situation feel briefly normal. A face appears in the doorway, lit from below by a weak flame. An older fisherman, lean as driftwood, eyes reflecting the lightning like coins. He does not ask why you are here. He does not need to. Out here, a small boat in a storm is its own explanation. You call out, keeping your voice steady, asking if you can tie up for a minute. He nods once, slow, as if you asked whether water is wet. You loop a rope around a post, hands clumsy, fingers numb from gripping. The post is slick, algae, and rain, and you almost lose the line. A flash hits, and in that white instant you see the fisherman's expression clearly. Not fear, not excitement, just the tired patience of someone who has watched the sky do this for decades. You climb onto the hut's edge, keeping low, and the boards flex under your weight. The whole structure breathes with the water, rising and settling like a tired animal. Inside, the fisherman gestures to a bench and says something about the beacon. You know what he means without translation. This lightning is famous. Catatumbo lightning, the so-called lighthouse storm, visible for miles on clear nights. Ships used it once as a navigational reference, a cruel kind of guidance. It shows you where you are and reminds you where not to be. You pull the dry bag up, unroll it, and check the instruments. The plastic is slick but sealed. You pat it like a pet because you are here for a job, and the job is what made you risk this. The camp needs these sensors by dawn. If you miss the rendezvous, the team is cut off. Fuel deliveries do not happen daily out here. Everything is a chain. And tonight, you are one weak link in wet clothing. The fisherman points at your boat, then points away from the hut. He tells you to move it off the pilings. Lightning likes tall, lonely things, he says. And his hut is tall enough already. He does not say, you are also tall enough. You hesitate, because moving the boat means climbing back out into it. It means touching metal, wet rope, wet engine housing. But the fisherman's warning lands in your chest like a stone. You untie and push the panga a few meters away, letting it bob on a longer line. Then you crouch low on the hut's edge, hands in your lap, trying to be small. Being small is ridiculous advice on a lake under a thunder factory. And yet, your muscles obey because your body believes in superstition when physics gets loud. Another development comes with a strike that is too close to ignore. It does not hit the hut. It hits somewhere in the channel, maybe a tree, maybe a patch of water. The flash is so bright, it erases color. For a fraction of a second, the world is only white and black. Then the air snaps, not thunder rolling, but a sharp crack like the sky breaking a stick. Your ears ring instantly, high and thin. The fisherman does not move, but his lantern flame gutters. The battery lantern on a nail flickers, then dies completely. Now you are lit only by lightning, which means you are lit by violence, on a timer. You swallow and taste something metallic, or maybe that is just your imagination trying to help. Your heart rate climbs, and you force your shoulders down. The fisherman says something else, quieter, almost casual. This is normal, he implies. And that is somehow the worst part, because normal means it can go on for hours. You look out at the lake through the hut's doorway. The horizon is no longer dark. It is a constant false dawn, pulsing behind the mangrove silhouettes. Every flash shows the same truth. The storm is not drifting past. It is parked, as if the sky found a comfortable spot and decided to stay. You remember the basin shape, the lake heat, the nightly winds. This is a machine, not a mood, and you are sitting in its intake vent. Another decision point creeps in, quiet but insistent. Do you wait here for a lull that might never come? Or do you push on while you still have engine power and some idea of direction? The fisherman watches you with a look that says he will not stop you. He has learned not to argue with people on deadlines. Deadlines are how humans pretend they can bargain with weather. You check your watch again. If you leave now, you might still reach the camp by gray dawn. If you wait, you might be safe, or you might be stranded anyway. And stranded means no rendezvous, no resupply, and a search that may not happen soon. You stand, slowly, timing it between flashes, like crossing a road. You step back into the boat, keeping your hands off the motor casing. You thank the fisherman, and he nods, already turning inward. Outside his hut, the lake keeps flashing, indifferent and bright. You untie, point the bow back into the channel, and commit, because shelter, even friendly shelter, is not the same as escape, and because being late feels, in this moment, like another kind of death. The lightning keeps time like a metronome, and as you drift closer, the delta stops being a shoreline and becomes a maze. So you start the engine again, because getting lost slowly feels worse than getting struck quickly. The motor vibrates back into your knees, and you immediately miss the illusion of stillness. Stillness felt like listening. Movement feels like being heard. The channel ahead narrows again, and the water speeds up as if the river is pulling you by the sleeve. You keep your shoulders hunched, not for warmth, just to make yourself smaller. The rain is steady now, no longer dramatic, just committed. Every flash shows a new arrangement of floating plants. Like the delta is rearranging furniture to trip you. You steer toward the darkest water, because dark usually means deep. Deep usually means fewer roots. Usually is doing a lot of work tonight. A bolt tears down somewhere to your left, and the reflection runs toward you across the surface. It looks like the lake is trying to climb into the sky. The thunder follows in layers, and the last layer feels like it comes from under the hull. Your stomach tightens because your brain still wants monsters. Geography is rarely polite enough to be a monster. It just behaves like physics with bad timing. The channel kinks right, and you cut the throttle a fraction. The panga glides, and the prop wash fades. In that quieter moment, you hear the mangroves dripping, not like rain, like leakage. The storm is charging everything, leaf by leaf, branch by branch. You are sliding through a wet antenna farm. Congratulations! You brought the only gasoline engine to a place that specializes in sparks. A flash catches the channel ahead, and you see something pale across the water. At first, you think it is foam. Then the next flash shows the outline, and it is not foam at all. It is a floating log jam, branches knitted together, half submerged, waiting at the bend. If you hit it, you lose the prop. If you dodge late, you kiss the mangrove roots, and the roots do not apologize. You lean your weight, you turn early, and you feel the hull scrape something soft and alive. Not an animal, a plant mat, thick as a wet blanket. The motor strains, and you keep it steady, because revving just chews vegetation into the intake. For a few seconds, you move at the speed of a tired person pushing through a crowd. Then the mat releases you, and you lurch forward into clear water. Clear is relative. It is still the color of strong tea, brewed in a muddy sock. You check the dry bag with your foot, making sure it has not shifted. It thumps back, reassuringly solid. The instruments are heavier than they look, and somehow that weight feels like purpose. Purpose is comforting when the sky is acting like a strobe light in a collapsing nightclub. Another fork of lightning crawls across the clouds, and you finally see the storm is centered right where you are headed. Not nearby, not adjacent, directly overhead, anchored like a nail through the atmosphere. You have the childish thought that maybe you can go around it. Then you remember you are in a delta, and deltas do not do simple detours. They do branching and trapping and returning you to the same problem from a new angle. The Catatumbo does not just meet the lake, it negotiates with it. Fresh water pushes out like a slow fist. Brackish lake water pushes back, patient and heavy. That back and forth makes a mixing zone, a humid engine room, and the storm feeds on it like it pays rent. You feel the wind shift again, subtle at first. Cooler air slides in low, almost gentle. It smells different, less swamp, more stone. That is the Andes, sending its nightly breath down slope. You cannot see the mountains in this light. You can only feel their influence, like a hand on the back of your neck. Warm lake air rises. Cool mountain air undercuts it. The warm air has nowhere to go but up, so it goes up violently. Up high, ice forms, pellets and crystals colliding like angry marbles. Those collisions separate charge, negative down low, positive up high. Now you have a battery the size of a county, and you are boating under the terminals. The lightning is the receipt. The channel widens suddenly, and the mangroves pull back. The water opens into a darker, broader reach, and the wind has room to run. You feel exposed in every direction, and your skin prickles as if it noticed too. You tell yourself, open water is faster. Faster means less time under the storm. This is the kind of math people do right before weather teaches them humility. A flash reveals the lake surface ahead, and it is no longer smooth. Short waves are forming, steep and close together. They are not ocean waves. They are worse in a small boat because they are sharp, like chopped glass. They slap the hull and spray jumps up in sheets. That spray is not fresh. It is brackish, slightly oily, and it tastes like old metal when it hits your lips. You angle the bow to meet the waves, and your wrists begin to ache from corrections. The storm is bright enough now that you can see the clouds in more than snapshots, towering cumulonimbus stacks, layered like dark apartment blocks. Cells keep forming in the same place, rising, collapsing, rising again. It is a conveyor belt, but the belt does not move forward. It keeps cycling in place like a treadmill set to punishment. You spot the pattern you did not want to spot. Bolts are hitting the lake in repeating clusters, not random, not scattered. Lanes, as if the storm has favorite spots and it returns to them like a bored person scrolling the same page. You try to stay low and uninteresting. You keep speed steady. You avoid the tallest silhouettes, the lone trees, the stray poles, anything that looks like a suggestion. You hug the leeward edge where the wind feels slightly less violent. But leeward is a wish, not a shield. The gust front arrives without ceremony. It hits like a door slam, and your chest tightens on instinct. The wind shifts direction hard, and the air temperature drops just enough to feel like a message. Now, the rain is coming sideways, and it needles your face. The lake surface turns chaotic, and the waves stack up in short, angry steps. The panga begins to hobby horse, bow up, bow down. Every slap sending vibration through your teeth. You grip the tiller, and the wet plastic handle twists in your palm. A flash shows the shoreline far off, and for a second, you realize you misjudged your angle. The storm has been pulling your sense of direction apart, flash by flash. Your inner compass is not built for stroboscopic reality. You adjust course, and the boat rolls, the hull showing you how thin the line is between upright and ashamed. A bolt hits the lake ahead, far enough to be safe, close enough to be personal. The flash is a hard white knife. The thunder arrives almost immediately, and the water under you ripples outward like it got punched. You smell ozone, sharp and clean, which is a cruel smell to associate with danger. Then, you see something you have only seen in videos. A faint flicker on the water surface, a crawling blue-white glow, almost delicate. For a half second, it dances along the wave tops. That is charge leaking through the air, searching for a path. Your hair lifts under your hood, and you feel your scalp tighten. Your body knows before your mind admits it. This is not just lightning around you. This is lightning preparing to include you. You force yourself to lower your posture, even while steering. You keep your hands as dry as possible, which is hilarious in the rain. You try not to touch metal. The engine is mostly metal. The boat hardware is mostly metal. You are sitting in a floating contradiction. The next flash is brighter, and it is closer than you can pretend. The bolt hits the lake off your right bow. It is not a strike you watch. It is a strike you feel through your bones. The surface water flashes into steam, a brief hiss, like the lake is exhaling in pain. The shock wave slaps the hull, and the motor coughs as if it inhaled water. Your hands jerk, and the tiller yaws. The engine sputters again, and the vibration becomes uneven, like a heartbeat going wrong. You push the throttle slightly, begging it to keep running. The motor answers with a wet, choking sound. Then it dies. The sudden silence is worse than the thunder. Without the engine, you can hear the rain and the wind and the frantic slap of waves. You can hear your own breathing, too fast, too loud. You reach for the starter, then stop because your hands are shaking. You try anyway, pulling the cord once, and it snaps back with a useless recoil. You pull again. Nothing catches. The motor is hot and wet, which is an excellent combination for disappointment. You glance at the handheld radio, and the screen is dark. Either the battery died or the shock did something more dramatic. It does not matter, because the result is the same. You are now alone with a storm that does not negotiate. The boat turns broadside to the waves, and you feel the roll deepen. The lake begins to move you, not where you want, where it wants. You dig for the paddle, hands fumbling in the dark space under the bench. You find it by touch, wood slick with rain, and you brace it against the gunwale. Paddling in chopped waves is less transportation and more a statement of intent. You paddle anyway, not because it is effective, because doing nothing is how you become a still point, and still points get selected. Each stroke is lit by lightning like a stuttering camera. You see your own hands in frozen frames, knuckles white, fingers pruned. Between flashes, you paddle blind, feeling the resistance of water, listening for the hull's angle. You aim toward the nearest dark smear that might be vegetation. You tell yourself, shallower water means smaller waves. You tell yourself, trees might break the wind. You tell yourself a lot of things, because the alternative is admitting you are a small object under a very busy sky. The rain warms again, almost bathwater, and it soaks into your sleeves. Wet clothes in the tropics still steal heat. They just do it slowly, like a pickpocket instead of a mugger. Your forearms cramp, and you shake them out between strokes. Lightning continues, steady, relentless. Some bolts are cloud to cloud, crawling sideways like nerves firing. Some are cloud to ground, spearing down in clean vertical lines. You begin to notice that the ground strikes keep landing near the same zone, farther out on the open water. It is as if the storm is tracing a map only it can see. That map is made of humidity gradients, wind convergence, invisible boundaries. To you, it just looks like the sky has a favorite place to hit. You try to be elsewhere. The paddle catches something under the surface, and your arms jolt. The bow swings, and for a moment, you lose your heading. A flash shows floating vegetation, thick mats, and a partially submerged branch with smaller branches like hooks. The delta's not only water, it is water full of furniture. It is a flooded forest trying to reclaim your hull. You pry the paddle free and keep going, angling around the mat. The smell changes again. It is faint at first, like someone struck a match. Then it becomes unmistakable. Rotten eggs. Hydrogen sulfide. The lake is coughing up its deeper breath. That smell means something important is happening under you, not just above. Lake Maracaibo is shallow in many places, and it is fed by rivers carrying nutrients, soil, and life. All that life dies, sinks, and rots. In deeper pockets or stratified layers, oxygen runs out. Bacteria take over, and they make different byproducts. One of them is this smell. the odor of anoxic water, of oxygen debt. Storm mixing is like stirring the bottom of a long-ignored pot. The lightning is the drama, but the wind is the spoon. It churns layers, lifts the sour water, and spreads it. Now the air tastes metallic, and you cannot tell if it is ozone or your nerves. You paddle toward shallows, and the waves do ease slightly, but the shallows bring new hazards. Submerged roots, hidden stumps, fence posts left from old boundaries, now meaningless in flood and silt. The hull bumps something hard, and the sound travels up your legs. You freeze for a moment, listening for the grind of damage. Then another wave lifts you, and you slide free. You exhale, and it comes out as a laugh that sounds wrong. This is what stress does. It makes comedy out of survival. Another flash reveals a line of dark verticals ahead. At first you think it is a stand of dead trees. Then you see geometry, pilings evenly spaced, a skeletal platform silhouette, low but unmistakably industrial. Oil infrastructure, Lake Maracaibo, has been punctured and scaffolded for a century. A working lake turned into a machine. Even in the dark, you can smell it sometimes, that faint petroleum tang under the mud. The platform looks like shelter because it is structure. It is something solid in moving water. It is something you can grab. It is also a tall conductor on open water, which makes it a lightning resume. You hesitate, and a wave slaps the bow, spraying your face. The cold of it is sudden, and your teeth clack. Your arms are tired, and the wind is still pushing you sideways. Desperation is not a plan, but it often wins arguments. You angle toward the platform. The closer you get, the louder it sounds. Not from people, there are no people. From metal responding to wind, a creak and groan that feels too organic. A flash shows the legs disappearing into the water, thick steel columns with barnacles and stains. The crossbeams are slick, and the deck above is a black grid. Everything about it says abandoned, except the way it still stands. That is the trick of industrial ruins. They look dead, but they remain capable of cutting you, shocking you, pinching fingers, collapsing at the wrong moment, capable of attracting attention from the sky. As you draw alongside, you notice something else in the lightning light. Tiny flickers along the metal edges, not full bolts, little dancing points of light that appear and vanish like fireflies with a job. St. Elmo's fire, corona discharge, charge bleeding off sharp metal points into the air. The platform is not just sitting here, it is actively participating in the electrical field. It is advertising. Congratulations, you have paddled directly to the most conductive object in your view. You hook your arm over a lower beam, and the cold of the metal shocks you with its intimacy. It is rain-chilled, lake-chilled, night-chilled. Your fingers want to stick, not literally, but your grip feels clumsy, as if your nerves are lagging. You haul the panga in close, and the hull bumps steel with a dull thunk. You fumble for rope, your hands forgetting simple knots. You tie off anyway, because any connection is better than drifting broadside again. You keep your body low, and you try to minimize contact. One hand on rope, not two. One knee on the wet floor, not both. You are making yourself into a bad circuit on purpose. You climb onto a low grate, water dripping through it, and crouch. The wind is different under the platform. It is broken up, chopped, less direct. The rain still finds you, because rain is persistent like that. But the waves are slightly calmer here, blocked by the legs and beams. For a moment, it feels like you have made a smart move. Then the little metal flickers intensify, and your skin tightens again. The storm is considering the platform the way a predator tests a fence. The air hums, not loudly, but you feel it in your fillings, in the base of your skull. You glance at the engine housing in the boat, and the idea forms. If you can restart it, you can leave this tall metal invitation behind. You reach into the boat, careful, and grab your small tool pouch. It is soaked, of course. Everything is soaked. You pop it open with stiff fingers and find a wrench, a screwdriver, things that suddenly feel like toys. You lean over the motor, and the smell, I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request, hits you before the sound does, sharp and oily, like a garage floor after rain. The platform is sweating old petroleum, and the storm is stirring it into a thin rainbow skin. You tell yourself it is just residue, just history, just a smell. But your stomach turns anyway, because your brain knows what slick water does to rescue plans. You brace one knee against the boat bench and lean in closer to the motor. The engine is still warm, and now it feels like a wet animal refusing medicine. You keep one hand on the starter housing and force the other to work by feel. You find the fuel line, then the choke, then the little screw that always feels too small. This is not mechanics, it is bargaining. You whisper at it like it can be shamed back to life. A flash lights the platform above, and you see the steel lattice for a split second. The structure is taller than you want to admit. The beams cross like ribs, and the deck above is a flat, dark mouth. It is shelter in the same way a cave is shelter, true, but full of opinions. The tiny flickers on the metal edges intensify again, and you feel your scalp prickle. That is the field building, the air itself being stretched thin. Your body wants to pull away from everything conductive. Unfortunately, you arrived by boat, and the boat is mostly a wiring diagram. You make yourself smaller anyway, because fear likes rituals. You wipe your wet hand on your pants, which does nothing, and pull the starter cord. The cord snaps out, then recoils with a damp slap. The motor coughs once, a small insult, then goes quiet. You try again, another cough, then nothing. The platform creaks, and the sound is perfectly timed with a distant thunder roll. For a moment it feels like the metal is answering the sky. That thought should not matter. It does. You adjust the choke just a little and try the cord again. This time the motor catches for half a second, then dies with a wet wheeze. You smell fuel. Not much, but enough to know it is reaching the cylinder and still refusing to cooperate. Congratulations, you have moved from stranded to stranded with extra fumes. The lightning above shifts from random flashes to something more deliberate. One long crawl of light skitters across the cloud base like a zipper closing. The air goes quiet for a fraction, the way a room goes quiet before someone shouts. You freeze with the cord in your hand. You do not want to be pulling on anything attached to a metal engine right now. Your ears catch a faint buzzing, not from the wind, from the platform. A strange insect sound, but there are no insects making it. That is electricity leaking off steel edges. Corona discharge, the storm writing in cursive. The hairs on your arms lift under wet fabric. You taste metal again, stronger. Your jaw tightens, and you remember every safety rule you ever ignored. Get low. Do not be the tallest thing. Do not touch two conductive points at once. And above all, do not act surprised when physics notices you. You drop the starter cord and pull your hands into your lap. You crouch on the wet grate with your feet close together. You try to make yourself into a small, inconvenient target. The platform answers with a flash that is not from the clouds. A bright flare blooms along one steel edge, a brief blue-white flame. St. Elmo's fire, again more intense now. The storm is not thinking about the platform anymore. It has chosen. The actual strike arrives with no cinematic warning. There is no slow build, no drum roll, no polite countdown. There is only sudden white, complete and total, like the world has been overwritten. Then there is the sound, a hard crack that turns into a shove. Thunder hits you in the chest like a slammed door. Your muscles lock in a reflex you do not control. For a fraction of a second, your body becomes a rigid object, and your hands tingle violently. Not pain exactly, more like every nerve shouting at once. Your ears fill with a high ringing tone, thin and persistent. You blink, and the after-image of the strike is burned into your vision. A branching tree of light floating behind your eyelids. When you open them again, the platform is still there. The boat is still there. And you are still here, breathing, which feels like the least expected outcome. You flex your fingers slowly. They respond, but the fingertips feel numb, as if they belong to someone else. The metal under you is vibrating faintly, ringing like a bell that refuses to stop. Rainwater drips from the beams in a faster rhythm now, as if the strike shook the structure loose. You smell something scorched. Not smoke, not fire, more like hot insulation and ozone. Somewhere above, a cable whips in the wind, slapping metal. A flash shows it for an instant, a loose line swinging like a tail. You are not sure if it was loose before. You're sure it is loose now. You scoot backward carefully, keeping your hands off the steel. Your knee brushes the grate, and you feel a small bite of vibration through it. It is not a shock, just a reminder. The platform still holding charge in its wet skin. The water around the legs is different now. The surface has a sheen that catches every flash and throws it back. A thin, oily film spreading outward in trembling bands. Rain hits it and makes it dance into swirls. The platform did not just take a strike. It shed a piece of itself into the lake. Lake Maracaibo has been producing oil for a century, and the infrastructure is old enough to have scars. Pipes, tanks, seals, all aging in heat and salt and neglect. Storms shake them. Tides tug them. Corrosion eats them patiently. Sometimes, a strike is not just light. It is a pry bar. You watch the slick widen and your throat tightens, because now the water is not only dangerous, it is slippery. If you go in, you will come out wearing a chemical apology. You pull yourself back into the boat, moving slowly. Your hands still shake and your grip is unreliable. Fine motor control is a luxury you do not have tonight. The storm continues, of course. One strike does not satisfy it. It is a machine. Remember, a nightly factory that does not care about your lesson. The platform is still tall, still isolated, still eager for attention, and you are still tied to it like a bad decision you cannot undo. You reach for the rope and stop. The rope is wet, and the cleat you tied to is metal. You can see your own logic now, laid out like a diagram. If another strike hits, the current will take every path it can. Steel legs into water, cables into air, wet rope into your hands if you make it easy. So you wait, watching the flashes, trying to find space between them. The gaps are short, but they exist. A fraction of calm, then violence, then calm again. You time your breath to the storm without meaning to. Inhale in the dim, exhale in the flash. Your heart keeps trying to race, but the rhythm outside is stronger. Another flicker crawls along the beam, and you flinch. Not from pain, from expectation. Expectation is what breaks people in storms. You lean low into the boat and grab the paddle again. You are not restarting the engine here. Not now. Not tied to a lightning magnet coated in rain and regret. You will leave under paddle, even if it is humiliating. Humiliation is survivable. You set the paddle blade against the platform leg and push off gently. The boat drifts back, the rope still attached, and your stomach tightens. You have to untie. There is no clean way to do it without touching something you do not want to touch. You reach for the rope with one hand and keep the other in your lap. One contact point, you tell yourself, like that will impress electricity. You pull the knot loose in clumsy jerks, fingers half numb. The knot resists, then gives. The rope slithers free, and the boat drifts away from the platform. You do not look back right away. You push with the paddle, hard, trying to gain distance before the storm notices you again. Waves slap the hull as you clear the lee of the legs. The wind hits you more directly, and the rain finds your face again. The platform looms behind you, a dark skeleton against flashing clouds. A flash lights it up, and you see the slick clearly now. A wide, shimmering patch. A second later, another bolt hits the platform. Not near it, not around it, into it, like a spear returning to a wound. The thunder is immediate, a thick punch that makes you hunch involuntarily. The platform flares with light along its beams for a split second, and you realize, with a cold calm, that if you stayed one more minute, you might not be thinking at all. You paddle toward the nearest darkness that looks like shoreline, not the open lake, not the storm lanes, the messy edge where mangroves tangle. The waves ease as you reach shallower water again, but the shallows are full of hooks. Floating mats of vegetation snag your paddle. Submerged branches bump the hull with dull thuds. Each time you slow, the wind tries to spin you back toward open water. The storm is not done with you. It just has other targets right now. You keep paddling anyway, because movement is your only argument. The air tastes worse now. The rotten egg smell grows stronger in patches, then fades, then returns. That is the lake being mixed, the deep anoxic breath being pulled up by storm churn. Hydrogen sulfide, made by bacteria in oxygen-starved mud. It is what happens when a warm, shallow basin collects too much life and then lets it rot. Lake Maracaibo is not just water. It is a soup of river sediment, algae blooms, decaying plants, and industrial leftovers. Storm winds stir it like a spoon, and you get to smell the bottom. You gag once, quietly, and swallow it down. Vomiting in a small boat in rough water is not a strategy. You aim for a cluster of mangroves that form a pocket, a darker notch in the shoreline. The branches knit overhead, and the sky becomes broken into smaller pieces. That helps your nerves, even if it does nothing for physics. Lightning can still travel sideways, and trees still get hit. But under canopy, you are less isolated, less tall, less obvious. You wedge the bow into the roots carefully. The mud sucks at the hull, grabbing like a hand. You step out into ankle-deep water and immediately sink to mid-shin. Warm mud closes around your legs, heavy and alive with invisible things. You pull the boat deeper into the pocket, using roots as anchors. The mangrove roots are twisted and hard like knuckles. They hold the shoreline together the way stubborn people hold families together. You drag the dry bag up into the roots, higher than the waterline. You wedge it into a fork where it will not float away. The instruments are your job, your reason, your deadline. You secure them like they are a sleeping child. Then you crouch under the canopy, breathing hard, and let your hands shake. The storm continues out over the lake, flashing in a steady pulse. From here it looks almost beautiful, a distant lighthouse with anger issues. The thunder is softer now, more rolled, less immediate. Distance makes it less personal. You sit on a root, and your wet clothes cling to you like a second skin. The temperature is still warm, but you are cooling anyway. Evaporation does not care that you are in the tropics. It steals heat patiently, like a tax. Your teeth chatter once, then stop. You force your breathing slower because panic burns energy you cannot replace. You listen for the engine, just in case it decides to start itself out of guilt. It does not. You listen for boats, for voices, for any sign of help. There is only rain, insects, and distant thunder. The delta absorbs sound the way mud absorbs footsteps. You take stock of your body in small inventory, fingers tingling, ears ringing, shoulders tight, no obvious bleeding, no broken bones. You are alive, which is not nothing. You check your headlamp briefly under your poncho, shielding the light. The battery is still alive, dim but functional. You do not turn it on again. Light feels like a broadcast. You reach into your pocket and find your matches sealed in plastic. You feel absurdly grateful, as if you might light a campfire in a mangrove swamp during a lightning storm. Humans love little plans. Little plans keep you from admitting you are waiting. Waiting is what you do now. You wait for the rain to thin. You wait for the electrical field to relax. You wait for the storm to move, even though you have learned it does not like moving. Minutes pass in fragments, measured by flash and thunder. Your sense of time becomes syrupy, thick, reluctant. You close your eyes for a moment, then open them quickly. You do not trust sleep. Sleep feels like surrender. And the sky is still working. Another strike hits somewhere out on the lake, and the flash brightens the canopy from below. The mangrove leaves glow green for an instant, like stained glass in a cathedral that smells like mud. You think about why this place does this, not just tonight, but most nights. Why the storm returns like a ritual. Lake heat is one piece. The lake holds warmth after sunset, like a brick wall holding sun. Warm air above it rises because warm air always wants to escape upward. Then the Andes send down their cooler air, flowing downhill at night like spilled water. That cool air is heavier, so it slides under the warm, humid air and lifts it. Lift makes clouds. Lift makes storms. And this basin shape, surrounded by higher ground, keeps the air circulating here. It is like a room with bad ventilation. Everything you breathe comes back around. So the storm keeps regenerating over the same place, over the delta, over the warm water. A closed-loop machine fueled by moisture and topography. The lightning is not a mood swing. It is the discharge of charge separation inside towering clouds. Updrafts fling ice crystals upward. Heavier Graupel falls, collisions strip electrons, and the cloud becomes a stacked battery. When the electric field grows strong enough, air stops being an insulator. It breaks down, and the bolt happens. People talk about lightning like it is random anger. Out here, it is more like accounting. A balance is overdue, and the lake pays it nightly. You shift your weight on the root and feel mud ooze under your heel. Something small moves in the shallows, a ripple, then stillness. Fish maybe, a crab, a snake. It does not matter because you do not want to investigate anything by touch tonight. You keep your hands tucked in your armpits for warmth. Your wet sleeves chill your forearms, and you hate how quickly your body adapts to misery. It starts to feel normal. Normal is dangerous because normal makes you careless. You force yourself to check the boat again. It sits half in mud, half in water, angled slightly. The paddle rests across the gunwale. The engine is silent, and the prop is probably tangled in vegetation, or fouled, or flooded. You know you will have to deal with it, but not while the sky is still throwing spears. The rain shifts from steady to intermittent. It is still warm, but it comes in pulses. You listen for changes in thunder timing. The booms feel slightly farther apart. That means the storm core is moving, or at least the most active cell is shifting position. The lightning is still frequent, but the brightest flashes are more distant. You breathe out slowly. You did not realize how long you were holding your breath in small pieces. Your eyes begin to feel gritty, the way they feel after staring at a screen too long. Except the screen is the sky, and the refresh rate is violence. You look out through a gap in the mangroves. The lake is a dark sheet, chopped by wind, reflecting flashes and broken lines. The storm is still over open water, still anchored south and west, but its edge is no longer directly overhead. That is not safety. It is a slight reduction in enthusiasm. You can work with that. You slide back into the boat carefully, stepping around roots. Mud tries to steal your boot, and you pull free with a wet, sucking sound. You sit low and reach toward the engine. One hand only. You remind yourself again like a mantra. You pop the motor cover, feeling the plastic tabs resist. Inside, everything is damp. Of course it is. The carburetor area looks wet. The spark plug lead glistens. Water and ignition are not friends. You pull out the small cloth from your tool pouch, already wet, but less wet than the engine. You wipe what you can, mostly symbolic. Then you remember the one thing you can do that sometimes works. You open the choke fully and pull the starter cord slowly, gently, to clear excess fuel. You do it twice, 3 times. You pause, listening, as if the engine will speak back. It does not. You set the choke halfway and pull the cord hard. The engine coughs. You freeze. Then pull again. It coughs again. Stronger. Your heart jumps like a trapped animal. You pull a 3rd time. The engine catches, sputtering, uneven. It runs like it is angry about being alive. You keep the throttle low, coaxing it. You do not rev it, because revving feels like daring fate. You let it warm, if you can call it that in this humidity. The vibration returns through the hull, and it is both comfort and threat. Comfort because you can move, threat because moving means leaving the canopy pocket. Leaving means becoming visible again, but you cannot stay here indefinitely. The storm does not end. It relocates, and dawn will come with consequences. You glance toward the instruments wedged in the roots. You reach out, grab the dry bag, and haul it back into the boat. It is heavier now, or maybe your arms are weaker. The dry bag thumps onto the wet floor, and the sound feels louder than it should. You tuck it under your legs, not for safety, but for reassurance. Your body wants something solid to hold on to, even if it is just plastic and sensors. The engine sputters again, and you flinch like it is a voice clearing its throat. You keep the throttle low, letting it idle in a grumpy, uneven rhythm. You can feel each misfire through the hull, like a heartbeat with bad intentions. Outside the mangrove pocket, the lightning still pulses over open water. It is farther now, but not far enough to stop being a threat. You lean forward and tilt your head toward the lake, listening for the gap. Not silence, just less. Less thunder stacked on thunder, less immediate slap of pressure on your chest. You get it for a moment, a thin lull where the booms arrive a second later. That is all you need to convince yourself. You have permission. You ease the panga backward, mud releasing the hull with a sucking reluctance. Roots scrape along the sides, and you keep your hands away from metal hardware. One hand on the tiller, one hand on your own thigh, like you are trying not to conduct your own anxiety. The bow swings out, and the wind finds you again. It comes in low and damp, carrying the lake smell and the sour hint of disturbed sediment. You point the boat along the shoreline, not straight across open water. Hugging the edge is slower, and that is the point. Slow means you stay near trees, near shallows, near something that breaks the wind. It also means more hazards, more snags, more chances for the prop to eat a branch. Congratulations, you are choosing between electricity and carpentry. The first 100 meters are a test of patience. Floating mats drift in and out of your path, pushed by wind and current like lazy barricades. You steer around them in wide arcs, because sharp turns on choppy water are how small boats get humbled. Lightning flashes behind you, and the mangrove canopy lights up in sheets of pale green. Each flash gives you a snapshot of the shoreline, and the shoreline is never the same twice. Branches lean, roots fork, Debris piles in new patterns. The delta is constantly rearranging itself, and you are navigating by a strobe light with attitude. Your ears still ring from the platform strike, a thin tone that makes everything feel distant. It is like your head is wrapped in plastic. You swallow, and your jaw clicks, and that ringing stays anyway. The engine keeps running, but it is not stable. Every few seconds it coughs, and your stomach tightens. You imagine water still inside the carburetor, waiting to kill your momentum again. You check the wake behind you and see it is uneven, choppy, not the clean line you want. Still, it is forward motion, and forward motion is a kind of hope. The storm out over the lake shifts again, and the flashes begin to cluster farther south. You watch the bright anvil tops flare, then fade, then flare again. It looks like a city skyline turning lights on and off, except the city is made of cloud towers. This is the part people call beautiful. It is beautiful in the way a loaded trap is beautiful. The pattern is the warning. You keep along the mangroves until the shoreline curves and the trees thin for a stretch. The water widens, and you see a gap where the lake opens its mouth again. That is the crossing you have been avoiding. You need to reach the camp, and the camp is not tucked politely behind these roots. It is out there, where the delta loosens into open water lanes. You slow the engine and let the boat drift while you think. The rain has eased into a fine mist, and your skin feels clammy instead of soaked. Your hands ache deep in the joints from cold and clenching. You flex your fingers, and the fingertips tingle in a way that makes you wonder what got cooked. You watch the lightning for a full minute, timing the gaps. The flashes are still frequent, but the strikes look less vertical near you. More cloud to cloud, more sideways crawling. That can mean the storm core is farther away, or it can mean it is building again. Weather loves being ambiguous. You decide to cross anyway, because you are still you, and you still believe schedules matter. You angle the bow out from the shoreline and ease the throttle up slightly. The engine responds with a strained whine, but it holds. The boat lifts over the first set of short waves, and spray hits your face. It tastes like old river water in metal, and you spit without ceremony. Your eyes scan the surface for foam lines, for slick patches, for anything that looks like trouble. In lightning light, everything looks like trouble. You aim for the darkest band ahead, because dark often means deeper, and deeper means fewer surprises. A flash reveals a line of debris off your left, a floating raft of branches and plastic. You adjust right, and the hull slaps a wave hard enough to send vibration up your spine. The instruments bump against your shin inside the bag, and you instinctively pull it closer. You do not want to lose the only proof you were ever here. The storm's thunder is less immediate now, and your body begins to unclench by degrees. That is when the lake reminds you it has more than one way to ruin you. The wind shifts again, and not gently. It comes in a sharp gust that rakes the water and raises a texture of ripples, like goosebumps on black skin. A moment later, a larger wave rolls through, not tall, but steep. It catches the bow, and the boat yaws. You correct, but your correction is slow, because your wrists are tired. The hull rolls, and you feel the lake try to turn you sideways. Sideways is the position where waves climb into your boat and stay. You push the tiller hard, and the engine coughs in protest. For half a second, the motor stutters and your breath stops. Then it catches again, and you exhale like you have been allowed to keep your life. Out on the lake, the lightning is still working. It is not overhead, but it is close enough that each flash paints the water into a mirror. In that mirror, you see something you missed. In the mangroves, fog. Low, thin fog hovering in patches above the water surface. Not the romantic kind, the swampy kind, the kind that forms when warm water meets slightly cooler air. It slides in fingers, drifting, and it makes distance even harder to judge. A flash lights the fog from within, and it looks like a ghost exhaling light. You keep going because turning back is emotionally impossible now. The shore behind you has become a dark smear, and the shore ahead is not much better. You are in the middle of a shallow basin under a storm that is only pretending to leave. You focus on the engine, note the one stable thing you can track. Then you hear another sound under it, faint at first. A clicking. It is not thunder. It is not rain. It is a sharp, small electrical ticking, like static snapping. You freeze, and the boat keeps moving. You look down at the motor housing, at the wet plastic, at the exposed bolts. The clicking continues, and it is coming from you. From your jacket, from your hair, from the air right around your head. Static discharge. The electric field is building again, reaching out, touching everything. You lower your posture without thinking, crouching as much as you can while still steering. The clicking gets louder for a second, then stops. A flash hits somewhere behind you, and the thunder rolls in a thick wave, not as close as the platform strike, but close enough to make the lake surface shiver. You keep your hands from resting on the metal throttle linkage. You steer with fingertips and fear. This is the part no one tells you about lightning corridors. It is not just the bolts. It is the way the air starts to feel wrong, like the atmosphere is leaning in, the way your skin knows before your eyes do. The storm has simply shifted its attention, and you are still within the radius of its boredom. Ahead, you see a faint gray line forming at the horizon. Not sunrise yet, just the suggestion of it. A thinning of night, a softening at the edges. Dawn is coming, slow and humid, like a curtain being pulled reluctantly. You should feel relief. Instead, you feel exposed. In darkness, you can pretend you are hidden. In daylight, you can see how far you still have to go. The sky flashes again, and you notice the lightning is not weakening. It is just harder to see against the growing gray. It is still there, working, just less dramatic in the brighter air. You realize the storm does not care what time it is. It runs on heat and wind and geography, not clocks. The first real light reveals the lake surface in detail, and you wish it did not. Foam lines snake across the water, marking where currents collide. Floating rafts of vegetation drift like islands that refuse to commit, and in a patch behind you, you see the oily sheen again, thin and rainbowed. It has spread farther than you thought. The storm has not only tried to kill you, it has stirred the lake's industrial scars into the open. You turn your head, scanning for the camp's location. You have a mental map, but it is based on calm water and good visibility. This is neither. You look for any sign of human structure, a pole, a roofline, a plume of smoke. Nothing. Just mangroves and lowland and the distant outline of hills to the west. The Andes are there, gray in the dawn, like a wall. They look calm from here, and that is the insult. They are the reason the storm exists, and they get to sit there quietly while you suffer. You keep moving, and the engine holds. It warms into a steadier rhythm, like it has decided to cooperate now that you have already paid. You let yourself believe you might make it. That belief lasts until you hit the next patch of shallows. The prop catches something, and the engine note changes instantly. A harsh vibration runs through the boat, and the motor struggles. You pull the throttle back, heart pounding. The vibration continues. You are dragging something. The boat slows, and the wind begins to turn you sideways again. You curse under your breath, not because it helps, but because it is a human reflex. You kill the engine immediately because running the prop while tangled is how you burn out the lower unit. Now you are drifting again, in gray dawn, in a half-lit world that feels more honest and more cruel. You grab the paddle and use it to push against the water, trying to keep the bow into the wind. Then you lean over the stern and look down into the murk. You cannot see the prop. The water is dark tea and silt, and the surface is dimpled by light rain. You reach into the water anyway, because you are already committed to indignity. The water is warm, and it feels wrong against your skin, like bath water that has been used. Your fingers brush the prop blades, then something stringy. Vegetation, thick and fibrous, wrapped tight. You pull, and it resists. Of course it resists. It has had all night to become a knot. You pull harder, and the vegetation slides, slimy and heavy, then snaps free in a wet clump. It smells like rot and lake mud, and you fling it away instinctively. Another strand remains, and you reach again, careful not to slice your fingers on the blade edge. Your fingertips tingle with the memory of the platform strike, and that makes you clumsier. You pull again, and this time it comes free, trailing long strings like hair. You check the prop by feel, turning it slowly. It spins, stiff but free. You wipe your hands on your pants, which does nothing. Now your pants are just wetter and smell worse. You restart the engine, and it catches on the second pull. The relief is immediate, and that is how you know you are tired. Small victories feel enormous when you have been negotiating with physics. You push forward again, slower now, watching the surface for more mats. You scan the shoreline for the camp, and finally, after another bend, you see it. Not clearly, but enough. A low structure on stilts, a cluster of tarps, a thin antenna mast. The research camp looks temporary, like it could be folded up and carried away. In this environment, everything should be temporary. The camp sits on the edge of the delta, where river meets lake, where humidity is born nightly. You see a figure moving, small and dark, against the gray. Someone is awake, because no one sleeps well here. You push the throttle a little, eager now. Then a distant flash pulses behind the camp, and your body tightens again. The storm is still active, and you are not done being in its territory. The closer you get, the more you see signs of last night's violence. Palm fronds torn loose, floating in the shallows. Bits of plastic and foam lodged in mangrove roots. A broken branch hanging low, stripped clean of leaves, like it was burned. Lightning does that sometimes. It boils sap, explodes wood from the inside, and leaves a tree looking like it was struck by anger. You approach the camp's dock, a narrow plank walkway. You cut the engine at the last moment and glide in, letting momentum carry you. The hull bumps the dock softly, and you grab a post to steady it. Your hand touches wet wood, and you almost laugh at how safe that feels. A person steps down onto the dock, headlamp on, rain jacket slick. They raise a hand, and you see their face in the weak dawn. Relief, then irritation, then that is the correct reaction to someone arriving late and alive. You try to speak, but your throat feels raw, like you have been breathing metal. You manage a few words, explaining the engine, the strike, the platform. They nod, eyes flicking to the sky behind you. They do not need the story to believe it. They have been listening to the thunder all night, too. You haul the dry bag onto the dock with both hands, and your arms tremble, not from weight alone, from delayed shock. The person takes it, sets it down carefully, and unrolls the top seal. They check the instruments quickly, like a doctor checking pupils. Everything looks intact. That is your job, technically accomplished. The person tells you to get under cover, to warm up, to drink something. You follow them along the plank walkway, stepping carefully. Your legs feel heavy, as if mud is still clinging to you in invisible layers. Under the main tarp, the camp smells like propane, wet fabric, and human fatigue. There is a table with maps, a laptop in a dry box, notebooks weighted with rocks. Science looks less glamorous when it is trying not to get soaked. Someone else is awake inside the shelter, hunched over a screen. They look up, eyes red, and you see the question in their face. Did you bring it? Are you alive? Do we have data? You nod, and they exhale like they have been holding their breath since midnight. You peel off your poncho, and water runs off it in streams. Your shirt clings to your ribs, and you feel cold now, properly cold, because the wind has had hours to steal your heat. They hand you a cup of something hot. It tastes like instant coffee and salvation. Your hands shake around it, and you spill a little on the table. No one cares. Outside, the thunder continues, softer now, but still present, still rolling in the distance. The storm has not ended. It has shifted its station. You sit on a plastic crate and let your shoulders drop. Your whole body feels bruised in places you cannot point to. The ringing in your ears is still there. You focus on the camp sounds instead. Tarps flapping, water dripping into a bucket, a generator hum, faint and steady, a human voice speaking softly about wind direction and radar loops. This is the after portion of survival, where you try to pretend it was all routine. Then, the camp leader, or at least the person who looks most awake, crouches near you. They ask, what happened exactly, and where? You point south, out toward the open water, toward where the platform skeleton is hidden now by distance and fog. You describe the corona flicker on the metal. You describe the muscle lock, the numb fingertips, the way the air clicked around you. They nod, and you see their eyes sharpen with professional interest, because this camp is not here for the scenery. It is here to measure the machine. They explain gently that the Catatumbo lightning is not a single storm. It is a pattern, a nightly habit. Warm lake air rises. Yes. Cool mountain air slides down. Yes. But there is more. The valley shape funnels winds, corrals convergent zones, and pins convection in place. The lake acts like a heat reservoir, holding energy after sunset, and the delta adds moisture like a humidifier set to maximum. All of that builds towering clouds, and the clouds build charge separation. The lightning is the release, the constant balancing. They tell you, almost casually, that this region can produce hundreds of flashes in a single hour on peak nights. They say it like they are describing a busy road. You stare at them. Then, out at the gray lake, hundreds of flashes. You think about your tiny boat and its tiny engine, and you feel your stomach tighten again. You also think about the fishermen navigating by this for centuries, not because it was safe, because it was visible, because the storm was reliable, and humans love reliable danger. They ask about the oil sheen you saw. You describe it, the rainbow bands spreading after the platform strike. Their mouth tightens. They tell you the lake has old infrastructure everywhere, some active, some abandoned, some forgotten. Lightning strikes can damage equipment, but storms also churn sediments and redistribute pollutants. A storm does not just flash and leave. It mixes the lake like a spoon, lifting whatever has settled. That includes hydrogen sulfide from anoxic mud. That includes oil residue. That includes nutrients that can feed blooms. You realize the rotten egg smell was not a side detail, because the smell meant the lake was not just being dangerous, it was being rearranged. And rearranged things do not go back neatly, not on your schedule. You sit there under the tarp, cup warming your hands, and you start doing the human thing. You start translating chaos into steps you can remember. Lightning, wind, engine, platform, stink, shoreline, restart, a story your brain can file away so it stops screaming. Outside, the gray light strengthens, and the lake shows more of itself. In daylight, Lake Maracaibo looks less like a stage and more like a work site. Wide, shallow water, stained by rivers and crossed by old industrial lines. There are poles and distant silhouettes that might be rigs or might be dead trees. Here, even the horizon has questionable credentials. Someone hands you a towel that is already damp, and it feels like a joke. You dry your hands anyway, because rituals still matter. The camp leader, still crouched near you, taps a map with a blunt finger. They show you where the main convection zone usually parks. Late night through dawn, it is almost exactly where you drifted. Because of course it is. They say the word convergence and then translate it into human. Air is being herded into one place, and it has to go up. You look at the map, then look out at the lake, and you feel small in a new way. Not frightened small, logistical small, like you are trying to outwalk a conveyor belt. A laptop screen shows a mess of colored blobs and a tight cluster blinking over the delta. Even now, in daylight, the lightning counter still ticks upward. Less than at midnight, but not zero, not even close. The storm is not a switch, it is a shift change. You ask, quietly, what the plan is now, because you did not come here just to deliver instruments and get traumatized. You came here to help measure this thing, and now you are here. The leader looks at your boat through the tarp opening. They look at you, then at the sky, then back at the boat. They say you need to check the outboard properly, not just make it run. Salt and brackish spray can ruin contacts, and a near strike can do weird things. They say weird like they have seen it before, which is comforting and terrible. They tell you the safer move is to wait until the electrical activity dips again, but they also tell you the instruments have to be deployed today before the next full night cycle, because tonight the storm will show up again like a returning tenant, and the data is the whole point of being miserable in a swamp. So you drink your coffee and you listen and you nod. Then you stand up and your legs wobble slightly as if the lake is still rocking you. You walk to your boat, stepping over cables and buckets, catching roof drips. The dock boards are wet, and each one flexes like it is considering betrayal. You crouch at the outboard, and the smell of lake water rises, warm and sour. You pull the cover off, and you see mud flecks, plant fibers, and a thin, oily smear. Not enough to drip, but enough to make your fingers feel dirty on sight. You check the spark plug cap, and it is still seated, still intact. You check the fuel line, and it is still firm, still connected. Then you check the lower unit, and the prop feels gritty when you turn it. That gritty feeling is silt, sand, maybe tiny shell fragments, all worked into seams. Lake Maracaibo eats metal slowly, with warm water and patience. You rinse what you can with a bottle of fresh water, precious like medicine. A second person comes out with a small toolkit and a look that says, "Do not argue." They show you corrosion on a contact point, greenish and fuzzy. They scrape it clean with a file, and the metal shines again. Briefly hopeful, they tell you to grease it, then seal it, then pray. Prayer is not scientific, but it is popular. As you work, you notice your fingertips still do not feel quite right. You pinch a bit of cloth, and the sensation arrives late, dull and distant. The platform did not kill you, but it signed you. A reminder that electricity can be generous and still take something. The camp leader calls you over to the edge of the dock again. They point across the lake toward a pale curtain of rain hanging far away. They say the outflow boundary is still active, and it can kick up gusts. They say you should not go back out alone until later in the afternoon. You hear the phrase, alone, and you swallow, because you did go out alone, and the lake taught you what that means. So now, the plan changes. Quietly, in the way plans do in dangerous places. You will not be doing solo runs today. You will be on shore, helping set sensors, logging weather, and prepping the next deployment. You are relieved, and you hate that you are relieved. The storm is out there, still flickering, still muttering. Your pride has no jurisdiction here. By late morning, the camp is fully awake, which just means everyone looks tired together. Someone is boiling water, someone is taping down cables, someone is checking a lightning detector. It is a small black box with a blinking light, like a pet that senses monsters. They explain how it counts strikes by picking up the radio pulse from each discharge. Lightning is not silent, even when you cannot hear thunder. It shouts in frequencies your ears do not speak. They show you last night's count, and the number is stupid. Not impressive stupid, administrative stupid, like a printer error. You look at it and you think about your tiny boat under that kind of output, You think about how thin the line is between surviving and becoming a statistic. Then someone points you toward the riverbank behind camp. They say the soil there is saturated, and they need the ground rods set deeper. Ground rods are simple, brutal things, metal spikes hammered into mud. They are supposed to give electricity a path that is not your body. You take the mallet and you walk into the mangroves behind camp. The ground squishes and water rises around your boots immediately. Every step is a suction sound, a wet kiss from the earth. You find the designated spot, a slightly higher patch with roots knotted like old rope. You raise the mallet and you start driving the rod down. The first hit sinks it easily because the ground is basically soup. The second hit goes deeper and dark water wells up around the metal. By the fifth hit, the rod is swallowed, leaving only a small segment above the mud. You stare at that and you think about last night again. How the platform begged for a strike by being tall and isolated. How the mangrove pocket felt safer because it broke you into smaller pieces. Here, you are building intentional paths, trying to make the storm's choices less random. Trying to negotiate with something that does not speak your language. While you work, thunder rolls faintly in the distance, almost bored. Even in daylight, the lake will not let you forget it. By early afternoon, the air turns heavier, as if someone lowered a wet blanket onto the whole basin. The sun is behind haze, bright but muted, and sweat forms without effort. The lake breathes warm air up, and the wind barely moves. It is not calm, it is loaded. You stand at the edge of the dock and watch the water surface. Small ripples move in slow patterns, and you see foam lines forming again. The same invisible boundaries, currents meeting currents, air meeting air. The camp leader walks up beside you and says, "This is the battery charging again." Daytime heats the lake, and the heat gets stored banked for night. The water is thermal mass, which is a fancy way of saying it remembers the sun. And at sunset, it will spend that memory upward into the atmosphere. You ask why it is so concentrated here. Why this delta? Why this basin? They point toward the west, where the Andes rise in hazy layers. They say at night, cool air drains down the valleys, katabatic flow. It sounds like a dinosaur, but it is just gravity pulling cold air downhill. That cold air is dense, and it slides under the warm lake air. Warm air does what warm air always does. It climbs. And because the lake is broad and the basin walls help funnel winds, the rising happens in one stubborn region. The storm parks because the geography parks it. A human would call that unfair. The lake would call it normal. Later, someone calls you over to a table with a small glass jar. Inside is lake water, taken from a deeper channel earlier in the day. It is cloudy, tea-colored, with a faint sheen on top. They tilt it gently, and a smell escapes even before it is open. That same rotten egg note, muted but undeniable. They explain that in calm conditions, parts of the lake can stratify. Warm, oxygenated water near the top and stagnant, oxygen-poor water below. Then storms mix it, and the deeper layer comes up like a confession. Hydrogen sulfide is toxic at high concentrations. Out here, it is mostly a warning label. It tells you the bottom is running out of breath. They also explain another unpleasant detail. When storms mix nutrients up, algae can bloom later and blooms can die, and dying algae uses oxygen. A feedback loop you cannot see at night, but you can smell. So the lightning is not the only danger, it is just the loudest. The lake has quieter ways to punish complacency. The afternoon drags on, and the lightning far out over the water becomes harder to see. Not because it stops, but because the sun washes it out. The detector still blinks occasionally, like a distant heartbeat. You spend the time helping rig a sensor mast, a simple pole with instruments mounted high enough to sample wind properly, low enough to not become a metal prayer for lightning. That balance is the entire job here. As you tighten bolts, you notice the way everyone avoids becoming the tallest thing. No one stands straight near the mast during active periods. No one holds a long metal tool upright like a flag. It is not superstition. It is lived memory. By late afternoon, the camp leader says the activity is low enough for a short run. Not you alone. Not tonight. Not ever again if they can help it. 2 of you will go in a second boat to retrieve a floating sensor that drifted overnight, a small buoy with a logger inside, and a radio beacon that should be chirping. Should be, but is not, which means water got in, or something hit it, or lightning did what lightning does, and cooked a circuit silently. You climb into the second panga with another assistant. They move with the calm of someone who grew up around violent weather. You move with the stiffness of someone still hearing ringing. You both wear life vests, and you both keep your heads low, even in daylight. The lake is calmer now, but calm here is not peace. It is a pause between statements. You motor out slowly, avoiding obvious vegetation mats. In sunlight, the mats look like floating lawns, bright green and thick. They are water hyacinth and other plants, invasive and opportunistic. They clog channels, snag propellers, and create mosquito nurseries. Like a side business. The other assistant points to a distant line of rigs and says the lake used to be even more crowded. Oil money built a forest of metal out here. Some of it still works, some of it is skeletal, and some of it is just rusted hazard. Lightning does not care which is which. As you move farther out, the smell shifts again, less swamp and more open water. But there is still that underlying industrial note, faint like a handprint that never washes off. You watch the sky, and you do not like what you see. Clouds are building again to the south, taller, whiter, with darker bases. Not towering yet, but ambitious. The sun has fed the lake all day, and the lake is starting to pay it back. You reach the buoy location by coordinates, using a handheld device that finally has a signal. The water is empty at first glance. Then you see it, a small orange shape bobbing near a foam line. You approach carefully because foam lines mean converging currents. Converging currents mean debris likes to gather there. You hook the buoy with a pole and drag it alongside. It is scuffed, wet, and the beacon housing is cracked, a hairline fracture, but enough to let water in, and water is the enemy of electronics. You open the housing, and a little water dribbles out. The other assistant makes a quiet noise of annoyance. Soft and practiced, they pull out the logger, and the screen is blank, dead or drowned or both. You think about the platform again, the strike, the flaring metal. Lightning does not need to hit your device to kill it. It just needs to be close enough to shove energy through the air. Electromagnetic pulse, a fancy term for the sky slapping your circuits. It is violence at a distance, which is the storm's favorite kind. You stow the buoy and you turn back toward camp. The wind is picking up now, a light breeze becoming something with direction. The lake's surface darkens slightly, small ripples tightening into a texture. You glance south again, and the clouds have grown. Base is darker, tops brighter. You feel the air change on your skin, cooler on the sweat, like someone opened a door. The other assistant says, "We go now, not later. Now, and you do not argue, because last night taught you the cost of optimism. You increase speed, keeping the bow into the growing chop. The engine hums steady, and you find yourself listening to it the way you listen to a friend breathing. Behind you, the clouds continue to build, and far off, you see a faint flash, daylight flash, barely visible, but unmistakable once you have been trained by terror. It is starting early. The storm is clocking in before sunset. Impatient, you push the boat harder, and spray hits your face. It tastes less salty than the open ocean, more earthy, more river. The lake is brackish, a mix of freshwater inflow and marine influence, and it never lets you forget. Your eyes water, and you blink hard. Another faint flash flickers in the southern cloud base, then another, closer in time. You look at the other assistant, and they nod once, jaw tight. They have seen this pattern, and they do not like it either. You reach the camp dock just as the wind strengthens into something pushy. You cut the engine and glide in, and hands grab the gunwale to steady you. The buoy is hauled out, dripping, and set on the table like a failed patient. The camp leader looks up at the sky, and the expression on their face changes. Not panic, calculation. They say we secure everything. Now, because when the storm starts early, it can be worse. The air is already charged, and the lake is still warm, and the convergence is setting up. You help lash down tarps, tie ropes, move loose tools into boxes. You lower antenna poles. Anything tall becomes suspicious. The lightning detector starts blinking more often, not constant yet, but frequent enough to tighten your throat. You hear thunder, faint, then clearer. A rolling sound across open water, like a heavy truck far away. The camp leader says the outflow boundary from earlier storms can trigger new cells. Cold air from a collapsing thunderstorm spreads like a shallow wave. When it meets warm, humid air, it forces it up, and new storms ignite. Storms can breed storms, like bad habits. You finish securing the last tarp line, and you feel a drop hit your wrist. Then another. Warm rain, lazy at first. The sky is not fully dark, but the light is flattening, turning gray again. Cloud bases thicken, and the horizon disappears into a wall of moisture. Someone calls for everyone to get under cover, and you move fast, not running because running makes you tall and upright, and you do not want to be that. You crouch under the main tarp again, and you listen. The first close lightning strike hits somewhere out on the lake, and the flashlights everything under the tarp in a harsh white. For a second, every face is a stark mask, eyes wide, skin shiny with sweat and rain. Then thunder follows, and the tarp jumps like it got slapped. You feel it in your chest, that low-pressure punch, and your body remembers last night in a rush. Your fingertips tingle again, phantom sensation like an echo. The camp leader speaks calmly but firmly. They say, "No. One goes outside during peak activity. They say if hair rises, if you hear buzzing, you crouch low, feet together, hands off metal. They say it like instructions for a fire drill, because that is what it is. Only the fire comes from the sky. The storm builds quickly now, faster than the night version. Flashes become more frequent, and you can see the southern horizon pulsing even in daylight. The lake is turning into its false dawn again, just earlier than planned. You watch through a gap in the tarp and see rain curtains sweeping across the water. Wind drives them in diagonal sheets, and the shoreline trees bend slightly. The basin is starting its machine cycle again. Warm air rising, cool air pushing, moisture condensing, charge separating. You cannot see the charge, but you can see the consequences. A new sound starts outside, a high whining hiss, like wind through cables. Then you realize it is the mangroves responding, leaves shivering in gusts. A few seconds later, you hear the sharper crack of closer strikes. Not the distant layered roll, the immediate snap that feels too nearby. The camp leader tells everyone to stay away from the dock posts and the generator frame. Anything metal becomes socially undesirable. You sit on a crate again, knees tucked, hands in your lap, trying to make yourself small. It is ridiculous. Again and again your body obeys. A flash hits close enough that you smell ozone under the tarp. Sharp and clean. It mixes with propane and wet fabric and human fear. A person across from you laughs once, short and strained, and then stops. No one joins in. Outside, the lake is brightening with constant pulses, and you